The slap echoed across first class. Trembling, 8-year-old Elijah touched his stinging cheek as passengers gasped. The white flight attendant towered over him, face contorted with disgust. "Your kind doesn't belong here," she hissed. Nobody knew his father owned the airline's parent company. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to stay updated on stories of justice being served. Now, let's see how a single slap changed an entire airline forever. Elijah Thompson was not your ordinary 8-year-old boy. With bright, intelligent eyes that sparkled with curiosity and a smile that could melt the coldest hearts, he carried himself with a quiet dignity uncommon for children his age. His perfectly pressed navy blue blazer and khaki pants reflected the careful upbringing by his father, Dr. Jamal Thompson, who believed appearances mattered in a world that often judged them before they spoke a single word. "Dad, will we see the Golden Gate Bridge from the airplane?" Elijah asked, bouncing excitedly at Atlanta International Airport's premium lounge as they waited to board their SkyWest Airlines flight to San Francisco. "Dar." Thompson smiled at his son, adjusting his own impeccably tailored suit. "If we're lucky and the fog cooperates, buddy. And if not, we'll drive right across it tomorrow after my meeting." What passengers around them didn't know, what almost nobody knew, was that Dr. Jamal Thompson wasn't merely a successful physician. Behind his modest demeanor was a billionaire tech entrepreneur who had quietly built an empire from a revolutionary medical data platform. 3 months ago, through his holding company Horizon Investments, he had become the majority shareholder of Transglobal Airways, SkyWest's parent company. He'd kept this acquisition quiet, preferring to observe operations from a customer perspective before making his presence known. "Remember what we talked about," Jamal said quietly, kneeling to his son's level. "Best behavior, just like always." "I know, Dad," Elijah nodded solemnly. "Twice as good." The phrase carried weight between them, their private acknowledgement of the unwritten rule for Black Americans: you must be twice as good to get half as far. It had been just 2 years since cancer had taken Maria, Elijah's mother and Jamal's beloved wife. Since then, father and son had become inseparable, navigating grief and the world's harsh realities together. As their boarding group was called, Jamal felt the familiar subtle shifts in the atmosphere. The quick double takes, the surprised glances as they walked toward first class, the slight stiffening of the gate agent's smile. These microaggressions were so common they'd become background noise in their lives, barely worth mentioning but impossible to ignore completely. "Boarding passes, please," the gate agent said, her tone neutral but eyes skeptical. Jamal presented their digital passes, maintaining his warm, professional smile. "Thank you." As they settled into their spacious first-class seats, Elijah carefully placed his treasured aviation encyclopedia in the seat pocket. The boy's fascination with flight had begun when he was just 4, and Jamal nurtured this interest, seeing in it both passion and possibility. The first-class cabin crew began their welcome rounds. Most were professionally courteous, if not particularly warm. But flight attendant Sandra Whitfield's reaction was noticeably different. With 15 years at SkyWest and an otherwise spotless record, Sandra had served countless first-class passengers. Yet when she spotted Elijah and Jamal, her smile faltered, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that didn't reach her eyes. "Can I get you something to drink before takeoff?" she asked other passengers, her voice musical and accommodating. When she reached their row, her tone shifted. "Drinks?" The single word came out clipped and perfunctory. "Apple juice for my son, please, and just water for me," Jamal replied pleasantly, either not noticing or choosing to ignore her tone. Sandra nodded curtly and moved on without the "certainly, sir," or "right away" she'd offered to other passengers. A businessman across the aisle caught this discrepancy and frowned slightly but said nothing. The flight was scheduled to depart in 20 minutes when Jamal's phone buzzed with an urgent call. "It's the hospital, buddy. I need to take this," he explained to Elijah. "I'll be right back. Stay in your seat and be good, okay?" "Okay, Dad," Elijah promised, already opening his book. As Jamal stepped away toward the galley area where phone calls were permitted pre-flight, Sandra watched with narrowed eyes. In her mind, assumptions crystallized: the child was unaccompanied, or worse, didn't belong in first class at all. Perhaps they'd upgraded just one parent and the child was supposed to be seated elsewhere. She'd seen it before, people trying to game the system, bending rules that others followed. "Excuse me," said an older white woman seated near Elijah, catching Sandra's attention. "Could I have another blanket?" "Of course, Mrs. Harrington," Sandra responded warmly. "Right away." As she fetched the blanket, Sandra kept glancing at Elijah, who was completely absorbed in his book, legs swinging slightly, not touching the floor. The contrast between her treatment of the elder passenger and her suspicions about the young black boy couldn't have been starker, though in her mind, she was simply being vigilant about who belonged in her first-class cabin. Little did she know that the child she was watching with such suspicion was the son of the man who effectively owned the entire airline. And in less than an hour, that fact would change everything. The pre-flight preparations continued around Elijah as he immersed himself in his aviation encyclopedia, completely oblivious to Sandra Whitfield's growing irritation at his presence. The flight was now 10 minutes from departure, and Dr. Jamal Thompson was still on his urgent call near the galley. Elijah carefully turned a glossy page showing the cross-section of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. His eyes widened with excitement as he reached for his apple juice to take a sip while studying the intricate details. The plastic cup sat precariously on the wide armrest. "Wow, look at the wing design," he whispered to himself, reaching for the cup without looking. His small fingers misjudged the distance, tipping the cup. Apple juice splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, droplets splattering onto the carpet and a few drops landing on his own pants. "Oh no!" Elijah gasped, immediately grabbing his napkin. "I'm sorry." Any other flight attendant might have responded with a reassuring, "These things happen," while helping clean up the minor spill. But Sandra, who had been watching for any confirmation of her bias, moved swiftly down the aisle, her face tightening with disproportionate anger. "What did you do?" she demanded, loud enough that nearby passengers looked up in surprise. "I'm sorry," Elijah repeated, his voice small as he dabbed at the spill with his napkin. "It was an accident." Sandra snatched the napkin from his hand. "This is first class," she said through clenched teeth. "We don't behave like this here." The emphasis on "we" carried unmistakable subtext. A middle-aged white businessman across the aisle frowned at Sandra's tone, while a woman 2 rows ahead turned to watch the interaction with growing concern. "Let me see your boarding pass," Sandra demanded suddenly. Elijah blinked in confusion. "My dad has it on his phone." "And where exactly is your father?" Her tone suggested she didn't believe he had one. "He's taking a call." "He'll be right back," Elijah explained, his voice steady despite his growing discomfort. Sandra crossed her arms. "I think you're in the wrong seat. First-class passengers don't typically leave their children unattended." The businessman across the aisle cleared his throat. "The boy's been perfectly well behaved," he offered. "I saw his father step away just a moment ago." Sandra ignored him, focusing her attention solely on Elijah. "I believe you're supposed to be in economy with your group. We can't have unaccompanied minors in first class." Elijah's composure began to crack slightly. "No, ma'am. My seat is here with my dad. 2B-C. He pointed to the seat number above him. "Without a boarding pass, I can't verify that," Sandra insisted. "You'll need to move to your proper seat before takeoff." An older black woman 3 rows back, Dr. Gabrielle Johnson, a pediatrician returning from a medical conference, observed the escalating situation with growing alarm. She could see the flight attendant's behavior for exactly what it was, having experienced similar treatment countless times herself. "Young man," Sandra continued, her voice hardening, "you need to gather your things now. I'll escort you to your proper seat." Elijah's eyes widened in genuine fear now. "But my dad told me to stay here. I can't leave without him." Sandra reached for Elijah's book. "This is not a negotiation." "Please don't touch my book," Elijah said, pulling it closer to his chest. "My mom gave it to me before she died." Something in Sandra's expression shifted. Not toward compassion, but as though his resistance confirmed her worst assumptions about him. "This is exactly the kind of disrespect I'm talking about," she said, reaching for his arm. "If you won't move voluntarily, don't touch me, please," Elijah said, his voice wavering but determined. "My dad said to stay in this seat." The tension in the cabin was palpable now. Several passengers had their phones out, sensing the wrongness of what was unfolding. "You do not tell me what to do," Sandra snapped, her professional demeanor completely abandoned. What happened next occurred so quickly that passengers would later give slightly different accounts to investigators. Sandra, frustrated by what she perceived as defiance, reached to physically remove Elijah from his seat. When he instinctively pulled back, her hand swung out and connected with his cheek with a crack that silenced the entire cabin. The slap wasn't just a loss of professional control, it was the physical manifestation of years of unchecked bias, delivered to an 8-year-old child whose only crime was existing in a space where Sandra believed he didn't belong. Elijah's head rocked sideways from the impact. His hand went to his cheek in shock, eyes instantly welling with tears he was trying desperately not to shed. The cabin erupted. A woman screamed. The businessman across the aisle stood up. "What the hell is wrong with you?" He was being disrespectful and refusing to comply with crew instructions, Sandra said defensively, but her voice shook slightly as she realized multiple passengers were recording the incident. Dr. Johnson was already out of her seat, moving toward Elijah. "I'm a doctor," she announced firmly, leaving no room for argument as she pushed past Sandra. At that precise moment, Jamal Thompson returned to the cabin, his important call completed, entirely unaware of what had transpired in his brief absence. The look of confusion on his face quickly transformed to horror as he took in the scene, his son holding his reddened cheek, tears streaming silently down his face, a white woman in a doctor's coat bending over him, and the flight attendant standing rigid, defensive. "Elijah?" Jamal rushed forward. "What happened? Who touched my son?" The question hung in the air for only a second before the truth became clear. And in that moment, though no one in the cabin could possibly know it yet, the future of an entire airline company had just been drastically altered. "Who put their hands on my son?" Jamal's voice cut through the cabin's chaos with a quiet intensity that commanded more attention than any shout could have. Elijah looked up, relief flooding his tear-streaked face. "Dad," he managed, his voice breaking. Dr. Gabrielle Johnson straightened up from where she'd been examining Elijah's face. "Sir, I'm Dr. Johnson. I'm a pediatrician." Your son was just struck by this flight attendant, she explained, her professional demeanor barely containing her outrage. I've been checking to make sure he's not injured beyond the obvious facial redness. Jamal's eyes locked onto Sandra Whitfield, who had taken a small step backward but maintained her defensive posture. He refused to follow crew instructions, Sandra stated, though her voice had lost some of its earlier authority. He was being disruptive and disrespectful. The businessman across the aisle couldn't contain himself. That's a damn lie. I watched the whole thing. This boy did nothing wrong except spill a drink accidentally and refused to leave his assigned seat when she tried to make him move. Other passengers nodded in agreement, many still recording the unfolding scene on their phones. Jamal took a deep breath, visibly employing tremendous self-control. He knelt beside Elijah first, examining his son's face with gentle fingers. "Are you okay, buddy?" Elijah nodded bravely. "It stings, but I'm okay, Dad. I didn't leave my seat like you told me." The simple courage in those words nearly broke Jamal's composure. He kissed his son's forehead before standing to his full height, turning to face Sandra. "Your name and employee ID number. Now." His tone left no room for refusal. Sandra hesitated, suddenly less certain. "Sir, there are procedures for filing complaints." "Your name and employee ID," Jamal repeated, each word precisely measured. Before Sandra could respond, the cabin door opened and Captain Benjamin Morris entered, alerted by another flight attendant about the disturbance. At 58, Morris was a veteran pilot with 30 years of experience who prided himself on running a tight ship. "What's the situation here?" he asked, taking in the tense tableau. "Your flight attendant just physically assaulted my 8-year-old son," Jamal stated clearly. "Slapped him across the face while I was taking an emergency call." Captain Morris's expression darkened. "Ms. Whitfield, is this true?" "Captain, the child was being disruptive and refused to comply with safety instructions," Sandra began, her story already evolving. "He became physically aggressive when I attempted to address the situation." The cabin erupted again with passenger objections. "That's completely false. We all saw what happened." "She's lying, Captain." Dr. Johnson stepped forward. "Captain, I witnessed the entire incident. As a medical professional, I can state unequivocally that this child was neither disruptive nor aggressive. He was calmly sitting in his assigned seat when the attendant demanded he move to economy without cause. When he politely refused, explaining his father told him to stay put, she struck him." Captain Morris's face remained professionally neutral, but his eyes reflected his dismay. He turned to another flight attendant who had appeared behind him. "Tanya, please take over Ms. Whitfield's duties." "This is ridiculous," Sandra protested. "I was simply maintaining order in my cabin." "Your cabin?" Jamal repeated quietly, a dangerous edge to his voice. Something in his tone made Captain Morris look more closely at him. Recognition flickered across his face as he processed the name on the passenger manifest. "Dr. Thompson," he said carefully, "I apologize profoundly for this incident. If you'll allow me, I'd like to address this situation immediately." Sandra noticed the captain's sudden deference but misinterpreted it as mere appeasement of an angry customer. "Captain, you can't possibly be taking their side without an investigation." Captain Morris turned to her. "Ms. Whitfield, you're removed from duty on this flight. Please gather your belongings and exit the aircraft. Report to the chief purser in the terminal." Sandra's face flushed with indignation. "This is outrageous. I was just doing my job." "That's not how I do my job," Tanya Rodriguez said quietly as she stepped forward to take Sandra's position. A 10-year veteran flight attendant with SkyWest, Tanya had witnessed similar incidents before but had always been too junior or too intimidated to speak up. And I think everyone here knows it. As Sandra was escorted from the plane, Captain Morris turned back to Jamal. "Dr. Thompson, I'd like to speak with you privately if possible." Jamal nodded once. "After we're airborne, Captain. Right now, my priority is my son." The captain nodded respectfully and returned to the cockpit to prepare for their delayed departure, leaving Tanya to restore order to the cabin. Jamal sat beside Elijah, who was still shaken but trying to be brave. "Does it still hurt?" he asked gently. "Not as much now," Elijah said, though the red mark on his cheek told a different story. Dr. Johnson approached again. "I've documented the injury with photos, with your permission," she said. "As a mandated reporter, I'm obligated to note that this constitutes child abuse. I'd be willing to provide a statement if needed." "Thank you, Doctor," Jamal said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "Gabrielle Johnson," she offered, extending her hand. "And it's the least I can do. Too often, these incidents go unchallenged because no one wants to get involved." Jamal shook her hand firmly. "Jamal Thompson. I promise you, Dr. Johnson, this incident won't be going unchallenged." As the plane finally prepared for takeoff, over 30 minutes behind schedule, Jamal took out his phone one last time before airplane mode would be required. He sent a single text message to his executive assistant, Code Phoenix. "Target, SkyWest. Full dossier on Sandra Whitfield. And contact legal. All of them." The assistant's reply came instantly, "On it. War room will be ready upon landing." Jamal switched his phone to airplane mode and turned to comfort his son, his expression betraying nothing of what was to come. But in his mind, calculations were already underway, calculations that would reshape an entire corporation. As the plane taxied toward the runway, what none of the other passengers could possibly know was that the man comforting the slapped child wasn't just an outraged father. He was a strategic genius who had built a billion-dollar empire by identifying systemic failures and transforming them into opportunities for revolutionary change. And Sandra Whitfield had just handed him the perfect catalyst. The SkyWest Airbus A320 reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the normal rhythm of flight service began. But nothing about this flight would be normal again. Tanya Rodriguez approached Jamal and Elijah's seats with exceptional care. "Dr. Thompson, is there anything special I can get for you or your son? We have ice packs available if needed for his cheek." "Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. An ice pack would be helpful," Jamal responded, his tone measured and professional despite the circumstances. As Tanya hurried to retrieve the ice pack, Elijah leaned against his father's shoulder. "Dad, why did she hate me so much? I didn't do anything wrong." Jamal closed his eyes briefly, his heart breaking at the innocent question. Every black parent dreaded this moment, the first time their child directly confronted the ugly reality of racism. He and Maria had always known it would come, had prepared for it, but preparation couldn't soften the blow. "She doesn't even know you, buddy," Jamal explained gently. "What happened wasn't about you or anything you did. It was about her and the wrong ideas she carries inside her." Elijah considered this. Like when Grandma says some people have darkness in their hearts, not in their skin. Exactly like that, Jamal said, remembering his mother's wisdom. "And that's their burden to carry, not yours." Across the aisle, Dr. Gabrielle Johnson overheard their conversation. After Tanya delivered the ice pack and moved on to assist other passengers, Dr. Johnson leaned slightly toward them. "Your son is remarkably composed," she observed. "Most children his age would be completely distraught." Jamal nodded. "Elijah has always been old for his years. Though sometimes I wish he didn't have to be." "I understand completely," Dr. Johnson said. "I have a daughter about his age. The conversations we have to have with our children that others don't." She shook her head. "I've been flying this route monthly for 6 years, and I've witnessed similar incidents, though never quite this extreme. The flight crews on SkyWest have a particularly bad reputation among black professionals who travel frequently. I've noticed patterns myself," Jamal said, his expression giving nothing away. "Have you ever reported these incidents?" Dr. Johnson gave a knowing half-smile. "Multiple times. The responses are always the same: apologies, vouchers, promises to look into it. Nothing ever changes." Jamal's eyes narrowed slightly. "Things will change this time," he said quietly. Behind them, other passengers periodically glanced toward Elijah, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. The businessman who had spoken up earlier stopped by their row on his way to the lavatory. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Jamal. "James Burnett. I want you to know I've already emailed my attorney about what I witnessed. What happened to your son was inexcusable, and I'd be happy to provide testimony if needed." "I appreciate that, Mr. Burnett," Jamal replied, shaking the offered hand. As the businessman continued toward the lavatory, Elijah whispered, "Dad, people are being really nice now." "People often rise to the occasion when they witness injustice," Jamal explained. "The problem is getting them to see it when it's more subtle." Jamal opened his laptop as Elijah returned to his book, the ice pack gently pressed to his cheek. To any observer, he appeared to be catching up on work. In reality, he was executing the first phase of a plan that had crystallized the moment he saw the red mark on his son's face. His first email went to Darius Wright, his chief legal counsel. "Incident on SkyWest 1507. Assemble full team for meeting upon landing. Prepare for immediate action on multiple fronts." His second went to Maya Jackson, his PR strategist. "Need complete vulnerability assessment on SkyWest Airlines and parent company Transglobal Airways. Priority focus on discrimination complaints, settlements, corporate culture indicators." His third went to Andre Williams, his financial advisor. "Activate acquisition completion protocol. Move timeline up to immediate. Prepare for public disclosure of our position." Meanwhile, in the SkyWest corporate headquarters, chaos was already brewing. The first passenger videos had hit social media and were spreading rapidly. #SkyWestSlap was trending nationwide, with the clip of Sandra striking Elijah being shared hundreds of thousands of times within the first hour. The airline's PR team scrambled to contain the damage, issuing a standard statement: "SkyWest is aware of an incident on Flight 1507 and is investigating. The employee involved has been removed from duty pending review. SkyWest has zero tolerance for any form of passenger mistreatment." But the corporate response team had no idea that the father of the slapped child was not just any passenger but the secretive majority shareholder of their parent company. Marcus Fletcher, CEO of SkyWest, was in the middle of a budget meeting when his assistant interrupted with news of the viral video. He watched the clip in horror, immediately recognizing the potential damage to the airline's already struggling reputation. "Get me everything on this situation," he ordered. "Who is this kid? Who's the father? What's our exposure here?" Back on the plane, Tanya Rodriguez approached Jamal again. "Dr. Thompson, Captain Morris would like to speak with you if you're available. He can come back to your seat, or if you prefer privacy, you could join him briefly in the cockpit." Jamal considered for a moment. "I'll come forward. Elijah, will you be okay for a few minutes? Dr. Johnson is right here if you need anything." "I'm okay, Dad," Elijah assured him, looking stronger than he had earlier. "Have you ever witnessed discrimination while traveling? Type 1 in the comments if you would have spoken up like the passengers did in this story, or 2 if you think most people stay silent in these situations. If you believe that corporations should be held accountable for the actions of their employees, hit that like button right now. And if you want to see more stories about justice being served, make sure you're subscribed. What do you think Jamal is planning as he heads to speak with the captain? Could this single incident really change an entire airline? The captain seems to recognize Jamal's name, but how much does he actually know? Let's continue this powerful story and find out what happens next. The wheels of SkyWest Flight 1507 touched down at San Francisco International Airport at 2:17 p.m. local time, 3 hours and 22 minutes after Sandra Whitfield had slapped 8-year-old Elijah Thompson. By the time the aircraft reached the gate, the incident had been viewed online over 2 million times. Captain Benjamin Morris personally thanked passengers for their patience as they deplaned, an unusual gesture that signaled the gravity of what had transpired. When Jamal and Elijah approached the exit, the captain extended his hand. "Dr. Thompson, I want to personally apologize again for what happened today," he said quietly. "In 30 years of flying, I've never been so ashamed of a crew member's conduct." Jamal nodded, appreciating the man's sincerity. Their brief conversation in the cockpit during the flight had been illuminating. The captain hadn't explicitly acknowledged Jamal's connection to Transglobal Airways, but his deferential manner suggested he at least suspected something beyond what was common knowledge. "Thank you for handling it professionally, Captain," Jamal replied. "I trust the company will do the same." As they stepped into the jetway, Elijah squeezed his father's hand. "Are we still going to see Grandma and Grandpa today?" "Absolutely," Jamal assured him. "But we have a few things to take care of first." Waiting at the gate was a scene neither of them had anticipated. 3 SkyWest representatives in crisp suits stood alongside airport security. Behind them, partially obscured but unmistakable, were news crews being held at bay by airport staff. "Dr. Thompson." A woman in her 50s with a SkyWest executive name badge stepped forward. "I'm Patricia Davis, Vice President of Customer Experience. On behalf of SkyWest Airlines, I want to express our deepest apologies for the inexcusable incident aboard your flight today." Jamal regarded her coolly. "My son is the one who deserves your apology, Ms. Davis." Patricia immediately turned to Elijah. "Young man, what happened to you today was wrong, and we are so very sorry." Elijah, still holding his father's hand tightly, nodded politely but said nothing. "We've arranged a private lounge for you," Patricia continued, "where we can discuss appropriate compensation and ensure your comfort." "That won't be necessary," Jamal replied. "We have transportation waiting." As if on cue, a tall man in a tailored suit approached from the side corridor. "Dr. Thompson, the car is ready whenever you are." Patricia looked flustered. "Dr. Thompson, we really would appreciate the opportunity to resolve this matter swiftly and to your satisfaction. Ms. Davis," Jamal said, his voice low but clear, "what would satisfy me right now is not something you're empowered to offer. But I will be speaking with someone who is." Patricia paled slightly. "I assure you, I have full authority to," to offer us flight vouchers. An upgrade? Perhaps a heartfelt form letter signed by a mid-level executive? Jamal shook his head. My son was assaulted today by your employee. This isn't about compensation. It's about accountability. One of the other SkyWest representatives stepped forward. Dr. Thompson, I should inform you that Ms. Whitfield has already given a statement to our HR department claiming she felt threatened and acted in self-defense. Jamal's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Is that the official position SkyWest is taking? The representatives exchanged nervous glances. No, of course not, Patricia hurried to say. We're investigating fully. Good, Jamal said. Because approximately 67 passengers and 3 crew members witnessed what actually happened. Not to mention the multiple video recordings. The third representative, a younger man with a legal pad, spoke up. Dr. Thompson, we've prepared an initial settlement offer that we believe reflects the seriousness with which we're taking this incident. Jamal didn't even glance at the document. I'll be meeting with Marcus Fletcher today. The representatives froze. Marcus Fletcher was the CEO of SkyWest, a man known for delegating customer issues to his team while he focused on larger strategic matters. Mr. Fletcher's schedule is extremely, Patricia began. He'll make time, Jamal interrupted with absolute certainty. 3 o'clock. His office. And yes, my son will be accompanying me. The representatives looked thoroughly confused now, uncertain how this passenger could be so confident about commanding the CEO's time. I'll see what can be arranged, Patricia stammered. Don't see. Do. Jamal turned to his waiting associate. Darius, is everything ready? Darius Wright, Jamal's chief legal counsel, nodded. The team is assembled at the hotel, and Mr. Fletcher's office has already been contacted. They're expecting you at 3. The SkyWest representatives' eyes widened collectively. Whatever was happening was clearly beyond their usual customer complaint protocol. Then we're done here, Jamal said, guiding Elijah past the stunned airline staff. As they walked through the terminal, Dr. Gabrielle Johnson caught up with them. Dr. Thompson, I just wanted to check on Elijah before you go. Jamal smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his stern demeanor. Dr. Johnson, thank you again for everything. How are you feeling, Elijah? She asked kindly. Better now, Elijah said. Dad says we're going to make sure this doesn't happen to other kids. Dar. Johnson smiled. That's wonderful. She handed Jamal a business card. I've included my personal cell number. If you need a medical statement or testimony about what I witnessed, please don't hesitate to call. I appreciate that more than you know, Jamal said, pocketing the card. Outside the terminal, a sleek black SUV waited. As they approached, Jamal's phone rang. Thompson, he answered crisply. He listened for a moment. Yes, Marcus. 3 o'clock works perfectly. No, this isn't something your PR team can handle. I understand you have a board meeting tomorrow, which is precisely why we need to speak today. Yes, I'll be bringing my legal team. He ended the call without waiting for a response. Darius raised an eyebrow. He doesn't know yet, does he? No, Jamal confirmed. And I want to see his face when he finds out. The drive to the downtown hotel took 30 minutes. Elijah remained quiet, watching the city pass by through the tinted windows. Jamal used the time to brief Darius on exactly what had happened on the flight, his voice controlled but the anger still evident. By the way, Darius said when Jamal finished, Maya has already compiled a preliminary report. SkyWest has settled 27 discrimination complaints in the past 5 years, all with NDAs. Sandra Whitfield was involved in 3 of them. Jamal's jaw tightened. They knew. They knew, and they kept her in a customer-facing role. It gets worse, Darius continued. Their internal diversity metrics are abysmal. Less than 7% of their executive team consists of people of color, and they've been sued twice for racial discrimination in hiring practices. What about Fletcher himself? Clean public image, but Maya found some interesting comments he made at a private industry dinner last year. Nothing explicitly racist, but definitely revealing about his attitude toward diversity initiatives. He called them necessary PR exercises with limited operational value. Jamal nodded slowly. Make sure Maya includes that in the presentation. When they arrived at the hotel, the full team was waiting in a converted conference suite. Maya Jackson, Jamal's PR strategist, was directing a team organizing display boards with data visualizations. Andre Williams, his financial advisor, was on the phone speaking quietly but intensely. Jamal, Maya said, looking up. Her expression softened when she saw Elijah. Hey, brave guy. How are you holding up? I'm okay, Ms. Jackson, Elijah said. Dad says we're going to fix the whole airline. The room fell silent for a moment, all eyes turning to Jamal, who placed a hand on his son's shoulder. That's exactly what we're going to do, he confirmed. But first, you need to rest for a bit. Grandma and Grandpa will be here soon to take you to their house. While Elijah rested in an adjoining room, the team finalized their strategy for the meeting with Fletcher. At precisely 2:45 p.m., they departed for SkyWest headquarters. Marcus Fletcher was waiting in his corner office when they arrived, flanked by his chief legal counsel and VP of operations. His expression was a practiced blend of concern and corporate poise. Dr. Thompson, he began, extending his hand. First, let me express my personal apologies for the disturbing incident on your flight today. I want to assure you that the employee in question has been suspended pending investigation, and fired, Jamal interrupted. Not suspended. Terminated immediately. Fletcher blinked, taken aback by the direct demand. While I understand your feelings, we have procedures that, she slapped my 8-year-old son across the face, on camera, in front of dozens of witnesses, Jamal stated flatly. Your procedures are irrelevant. Fletcher's legal counsel leaned forward. Dr. Thompson, while the incident is disturbing, there are labor regulations and union considerations. Jamal turned to Darius, who promptly opened a folder and removed a document. This is a compilation of 17 customer complaints specifically naming Sandra Whitfield for discriminatory behavior over the past 5 years. 3 resulted in confidential settlements. Fletcher's face registered shock, quickly masked. I wasn't aware of, that's the problem, Jamal interrupted again. You should have been aware. It's your airline. Fletcher's expression hardened slightly. Dr. Thompson, I appreciate your concern, but SkyWest has over 12,000 employees. I can't possibly be aware of every personnel issue. Then perhaps you should focus more on systemic issues, Jamal suggested. For instance, why SkyWest's discrimination complaint rate is 93% higher than the industry average. The VP of Operations frowned. Where are you getting these figures? Our internal metrics don't show. Your internal metrics are designed to obscure rather than illuminate, Maya interjected, sliding a data visualization across the table. When properly analyzed, the pattern is unmistakable. Fletcher was becoming visibly uncomfortable. While we always strive to improve, I think you're making some rather broad assumptions based on isolated incidents. Nothing about this is isolated, Jamal said, his voice dangerously quiet. What happened to my son today is the inevitable result of a corporate culture that tolerates bias at every level. That's simply not true, Fletcher protested. SkyWest is committed to diversity and inclusion. Is that why only 4% of your pilots are black? Andre asked. Or why your flight attendant workforce has the lowest diversity metrics among major carriers? Fletcher's patience was clearly wearing thin. I'm not sure how you obtained that information, but regardless, I think we're getting off track. We're here to discuss appropriate compensation for today's unfortunate incident. Jamal leaned forward. I'm not interested in compensation, Mr. Fletcher. I'm interested in transformation. Transformation? Fletcher repeated, confused. Complete overhaul of your hiring practices, training protocols, complaint procedures, and executive diversity, Jamal elaborated. Starting with your resignation. Fletcher stared in disbelief, then let out a short, incredulous laugh. Dr. Thompson, while I respect your passion, you're not in a position to make those kinds of demands. Jamal smiled for the first time since entering the room. Actually, I am. He nodded to Andre, who slid a document across the table. Fletcher glanced down at it, his expression shifting from dismissive to confused to shocked in the span of seconds. This can't be right, he stammered. It is, Jamal confirmed. 3 months ago, my investment firm, Horizon Ventures, became the majority shareholder in Transglobal Airways. Which, as you know, is SkyWest's parent company. The blood drained from Fletcher's face as the full implications became clear. The angry father sitting across from him wasn't just a disgruntled customer, he was effectively his boss. Why didn't you identify yourself immediately? Fletcher asked, his voice hollow. Because I wanted to experience your airline as a regular customer, Jamal explained. And today, I did. My son and I experienced exactly what countless others have endured under your leadership. He stood up. You'll receive a detailed transformation plan by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I suggest you read it carefully before the board meeting. As Jamal and his team rose to leave, Fletcher made one last desperate attempt. Dr. Thompson, I'm sure we can work together on these issues without such drastic measures. Jamal paused at the door. My son asked me a question today, Mr. Fletcher. He asked why your employee hated him so much when she didn't even know him. As his father, I had to explain the ugly reality of racism to an 8-year-old who just wanted to read his book and drink his apple juice. His voice remained controlled but carried an emotional weight that filled the room. So no, we cannot work together on this. Your time at SkyWest is over. The only question that remains is whether you'll exit gracefully or be publicly removed. With that, Jamal Thompson and his team walked out, leaving behind a CEO whose world had just been irrevocably upended by a slap he hadn't delivered but was nonetheless responsible for. As they left the building, Elijah looked up at his father. Did you fix it, Dad? Jamal squeezed his son's hand. We've just begun, buddy. But yes, we're going to fix it. The Thompson suite at the Four Seasons San Francisco had been transformed into a command center within hours of their arrival. 3 adjoining luxury rooms now housed a coordinated operation that would have impressed military strategists. In the central suite, screens displayed real-time social media analytics, news coverage, and financial data for SkyWest Airlines and its parent company Transglobal Airways. Elijah sat in a plush armchair in the corner, wearing fresh clothes and looking considerably more relaxed as he watched his father and the team work with fascination. Jamal had called his parents, who had offered to pick Elijah up, but his son had insisted on staying. "I want to see how you fix things, Dad," he'd said with surprising determination. Jamal couldn't refuse. After all, this entire effort was ultimately about creating a better world for Elijah to grow up in. Perhaps witnessing the process of systemic change would be educational. Maya Jackson stood at the center of the room, directing her team as they monitored the public narrative. "The video has reached 17 million views across platforms," she reported. "Public sentiment is 93% in our favor." Sandra Whitfield gave an interview to local news an hour ago, claiming she felt threatened. "How's that playing?" Jamal asked, reviewing documents at a desk nearby. "Terribly for her," Maya confirmed. "They ran it alongside the footage. She's being eviscerated online." Darius Wright entered from the adjoining room, phone in hand. "SkyWest's legal team just called. They're trying to schedule a follow-up meeting for next week." Jamal didn't look up from his documents. "They're stalling. Ignore it." "Also," Darius continued, 3 former SkyWest flight attendants have reached out through our website. All claim to have witnessed Sandra's discriminatory behavior in the past and reported it without result." Now Jamal looked up, interested. "Get their statements. Full depositions if they're willing." Andre Williams walked in, his expression grave. SkyWest stock dropped 11% in after-hours trading when news broke about the incident. Analysts are predicting further decline when markets open tomorrow. "And what about our holdings?" Jamal asked. "We're insulated," Andre assured him. "The diversified structure of our ownership through Horizon Ventures means we can weather the temporary devaluation. In fact, it might make Phase 2 of the acquisition even more favorable for us." Jamal nodded, satisfied. He had built his fortune through a combination of technological innovation and strategic investment, always with an eye toward creating systemic change in industries resistant to progress. What had begun as a medical data platform had expanded into a business empire that allowed him to influence sectors from healthcare to transportation. "Dad?" Elijah's voice drew his attention. "Are you going to fire everyone like Ms. Whitfield?" The room quieted. It was a surprisingly insightful question from an 8-year-old. Jamal considered his answer carefully. "No, buddy. Most of the people at the airline are good people just doing their jobs. We're going to change the system that allowed someone like Ms. Whitfield to behave that way without consequences." Elijah nodded, processing this. "Like how you told me some gardens have bad soil, so even good seeds can't grow right." Jamal smiled, remembering the analogy he'd used during a conversation about school environments months ago. "Exactly like that. We're going to fix the soil." Maya's phone buzzed with an alert. Marcus Fletcher just released a statement. "Standard corporate language, deep concern, thorough investigation, commitment to diversity. No mention of Whitfield's termination or our ownership stake." "He's buying time," Darius noted. "Probably hoping to rally board support." "Let him try," Jamal said with quiet confidence. "The board meeting is at 10 tomorrow. That gives us," he checked his watch, 14 hours to ensure he walks in completely isolated. The door opened, and Jamal's parents, William and Dorothy Thompson, entered the suite. At 72, William was still imposing, a retired civil rights attorney whose work had helped desegregate schools in the South. Dorothy, 70, had been an educator for 40 years, serving as principal of one of Atlanta's most successful public high schools. Grandma. Grandpa. Elijah ran to them, receiving warm embraces. Dorothy examined her grandson's face, gently touching the faint mark that remained on his cheek. Her expression hardened momentarily before softening again. "My brave boy," she murmured. William looked over at his son. "Jamal, we saw the news. How are you handling this?" "Systematically," Jamal replied, embracing his father. William nodded in understanding. "Good. Band-aids never fixed broken systems." It was a phrase Jamal had heard throughout his childhood, his father's mantra when fighting institutional injustice. Now it guided his own approach. "We came to take Elijah for dinner and some rest," Dorothy explained. "Unless you need him here." Jamal looked at his son. "What do you think, buddy? Want to go with Grandma and Grandpa for a while?" Elijah hesitated. "Will you still be fixing things if I go?" "Absolutely," Jamal assured him. "And tomorrow, you'll see the results." This seemed to satisfy Elijah. "Okay. But I want to come back for the board meeting." Jamal exchanged glances with his parents, who nodded their approval. "Deal. But now I need you to rest and get your strength back." After Elijah left with his grandparents, the mood in the command center shifted subtly. The team, no longer mindful of a child's presence, spoke more bluntly about the challenges ahead. "Fletcher's going to fight," Darius warned. "He's got 15 years at Sky West and strong relationships with several board members. Which is precisely why he's failed to address these issues," Jamal replied. "He's comfortable, complacent, and convinced the status quo is acceptable." Maya's team had created a visualization of complaints against Sky West over the past decade, color-coded by type and resolution. The pattern was unmistakable. Racial discrimination complaints were systematically downplayed, settled quietly, or dismissed entirely. "Look at this," Maya pointed to a cluster of data points. 3 years ago, there was a surge in complaints after they instituted new passenger compliance guidelines. The policy itself wasn't explicitly discriminatory, but its implementation disproportionately affected passengers of color. "And who authored those guidelines?" Jamal asked. "A committee headed by Fletcher himself," Maya confirmed. Jamal nodded, pieces falling into place. "So it's not just isolated incidents. It's by design, perhaps not consciously racist, but systemically biased in application and effect." The evening progressed with methodical efficiency. Former employees were interviewed remotely, providing damning testimonials about Sky West's culture. Financial analysts prepared projections showing how diversity initiatives could actually improve the airline's bottom line. Legal experts drafted a comprehensive transformation plan that would be presented to the board. At midnight, Jamal received a call from an unexpected source, Captain Benjamin Morris. "Dr. Thompson," the captain began, "I hope I'm not calling too late." "Not at all, Captain," Jamal assured him. "What can I do for you?" "It's more what I can do for you," Morris replied. "I've been with Sky West for 23 years. I've watched promising diversity initiatives get starved of resources. I've seen complaints buried. And I've kept detailed records of every incident." Jamal exchanged glances with Darius, who was listening nearby. "That could be extremely valuable, Captain. May I ask why you're coming forward now?" There was a pause before Morris answered. "Because today, I watched a colleague slap a child for being black in first class. And I realized that my silence has made me complicit. The raw honesty in the man's voice was compelling. I appreciate your candor, Captain. Would you be willing to share those records? Already compiled and ready to send, Morris confirmed. And I'm prepared to testify before the board if needed. There are others too, pilots, attendants, ground crew, who are sick of the toxic culture but afraid to speak up. Fear is a powerful silencer, Jamal acknowledged. It is, Morris agreed. But what happened to your son has become a tipping point. People are finding their courage. After the call, Jamal stood at the window overlooking San Francisco's glittering nightscape. The city where he'd built his first company, where he'd proposed to Maria, where Elijah had been born, it held so many significant memories. And now, it would be where he catalyzed transformation of an entire industry. His phone buzzed with an email notification. SkyWest stock had dropped another 4% in Asian markets, where trading was already open. The financial pressure was mounting exactly as planned. Jamal, Andre called from his workstation. You should see this. On screen was a financial news alert. Anonymous source reveals major shareholder preparing action against SkyWest following discrimination incident. Maya looked up from her tablet. That wasn't us. No, Jamal agreed, a slight smile forming. That was the market responding to rumors. Exactly on schedule. By 2 a.m., the transformation plan was complete, a comprehensive 50-page document detailing immediate actions, short-term goals, and long-term structural changes. It addressed everything from hiring practices to training protocols, complaint procedures to executive diversity requirements. At its core was a simple but revolutionary principle: accountability at every level, with transparent metrics and consequences for failure. As the team finally dispersed for a few hours of rest before the board meeting, Jamal remained behind, making one final review of the plan. His thoughts drifted to Maria, who had always been his moral compass and strongest supporter. I wish you could see this, he whispered to the empty room. I'm using everything you taught me. Maria had been the one who insisted they keep their wealth quiet, who wanted Elijah to grow up understanding value beyond money. She had believed deeply in using privilege to create change rather than comfort. When he finally slept, it was with the certainty that tomorrow would not just bring justice for his son's humiliation. It would begin a transformation that Maria would have been proud of. And somewhere across the city, in a modest apartment, Sandra Whitfield watched her career and reputation unravel on late-night news, still unable to comprehend how slapping one child had ignited a firestorm that would consume everything she thought she knew. The Transglobal Airways boardroom occupied the entire top floor of their San Francisco headquarters, offering panoramic views of the bay. The 23 board members seated around the massive mahogany table represented some of the most powerful figures in transportation and finance. They had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine quarterly meeting, but the atmosphere was anything but routine. Marcus Fletcher sat rigidly at the head of the table, his usual confident demeanor replaced by barely concealed anxiety. The overnight financial reports lay before each board member. SkyWest stock had plummeted 17% since markets opened, dragging Transglobal's value down with it. Ladies and gentlemen, Fletcher began, before we address the agenda, I need to brief you on a situation that developed yesterday involving one of our subsidiaries. He outlined the incident in carefully sanitized corporate language: customer service failure, inappropriate employee conduct, and viral social media response, while avoiding direct mention of the slap or racial component. We've implemented standard crisis management protocols, Fletcher assured them. Our PR team has issued statements emphasizing our commitment to customer safety and satisfaction. The employee has been suspended pending investigation, and we've reached out to the affected parties to offer appropriate compensation. Board member Victoria Zhao, CEO of a major tech company, leaned forward. Marcus, I saw the video like everyone else. A SkyWest flight attendant slapped a black child and made explicitly racist comments. Let's not minimize what happened. Murmurs of agreement circulated around the table. And this isn't an isolated incident, continued Roland Matthews, the board's longest-serving member. My office has compiled data suggesting a pattern of similar complaints against SkyWest specifically. Fletcher's collar suddenly felt too tight. While there have been occasional customer service issues, Matthews interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. 67 documented discrimination complaints in the past 5 years. 27 settlements with NDAs. That's not occasional, Marcus. That's systemic. Fletcher's surprise was genuine. His own legal team had clearly been sheltering him from the full scope of the problem. I wasn't aware of the complete numbers, he admitted. But I assure you, we're taking this current situation very seriously. Seriously enough to tender your resignation? Asked Zhao pointedly. Fletcher stiffened. Victoria, with all due respect, this incident, while unfortunate, hardly warrants. He was interrupted by his assistant entering the boardroom. I apologize for the intrusion, but Dr. Jamal Thompson and his team are here for their scheduled presentation. Confusion spread across the faces of most board members. I don't recall approving an external presentation for today's meeting, said Chairman Lawrence Blackwell. Dr. Thompson's team contacted us last night, the assistant explained uncomfortably. Mr. Fletcher approved the addition to the agenda. All eyes turned to Fletcher, who had no choice but to nod stiffly. Given the circumstances, I thought it prudent to hear their perspective. What Fletcher couldn't reveal was that he'd spent a sleepless night weighing his options and had concluded that openly opposing Thompson would only worsen his position. He'd hoped to frame the presentation as merely an aggrieved customer being granted unusual access, then move on quickly to damage control. Show them in, Blackwell instructed, curiosity evident in his tone. Jamal Thompson entered the boardroom with purpose, followed by his core team, Darius, Maya, and Andre, along with Elijah and Jamal's parents. Their presence immediately changed the room's energy, and all eyes were drawn to the small boy who stood tall beside his father, the faint mark still visible on his cheek. Thank you for accommodating us on short notice, Jamal began, his voice measured and authoritative. My name is Dr. Jamal Thompson. This is my son, Elijah, who yesterday was physically assaulted by a SkyWest employee for the crime of sitting in a first-class seat while being black. The directness of his statement created an immediate tension. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Thompson, Fletcher attempted to interject, we've already expressed our sincere regrets about the incident and, Mr. Fletcher, Jamal cut him off smoothly, I didn't come here for regrets. I came to address a systemic failure that yesterday's incident merely exposed. He nodded to Maya, who distributed copies of their report to each board member. This document details not just what happened to my son, but the pattern of discrimination that has been allowed to flourish under current leadership. As the board members began skimming the comprehensive report, Jamal continued. I've had extensive conversations with your CEO. I've reviewed your company's handling of similar incidents. And I've concluded that meaningful change will require intervention at the highest levels. Fletcher's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Jamal delivered the bombshell. Which is why, 3 months ago, my investment firm, Horizon Ventures, began acquiring shares in Transglobal Airways. As of last week, we completed a transaction making us the majority shareholder. The boardroom erupted in shocked exclamations and urgent whispers. Chairman Blackwell raised his hands for silence. "Dr. Thompson, are you claiming to be our majority shareholder?" he asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Andre stepped forward, distributing another document. This certification from Transglobal's own transfer agent confirms Horizon Ventures now controls 53% of outstanding shares. All SEC filings were completed last week, though we hadn't planned to announce our position until next month. Fletcher stood abruptly. "This is unprecedented. You deliberately concealed your ownership to what end? To entrap us?" Jamal remained perfectly calm. "To experience your airline as a customer, Mr. Fletcher. To see firsthand whether the values you claim in press releases and annual reports are reflected in actual passenger experiences." He gestured toward Elijah. "The results of that experiment are self-evident." Chairman Blackwell, a seasoned corporate veteran, quickly grasped the new reality. "Dr. Thompson, while this is certainly an unusual approach, as majority shareholder, you're entitled to address this board. What precisely are you proposing?" "A complete restructuring of SkyWest's executive leadership, beginning with Mr. Fletcher's immediate removal as CEO," Jamal stated. "Implementation of the comprehensive transformation plan detailed in your packets. And a public commitment to measurable, transparent diversity and inclusion metrics with accountability at every level." Fletcher found his voice again. "This is nothing short of a hostile takeover disguised as social justice." "No, Mr. Fletcher," Jamal replied evenly. "This is accountability disguised as nothing at all." He turned to address the entire board. "Let me be clear about my motivations. I didn't acquire Transglobal Airways to expand my portfolio or extract value. I did it because transportation, how we move through the world, is fundamental to human dignity. And when my 8-year-old son can't safely occupy the space we paid for without being physically attacked, the system is broken at its core." Jamal moved to stand beside Elijah, placing a hand on his shoulder. "My late wife and I built our company on a simple principle. Identify broken systems and fix them, not with cosmetic changes but with fundamental restructuring. That's exactly what SkyWest requires." Fletcher made one last desperate attempt. "The board cannot seriously entertain such radical demands based on a single unfortunate incident." Darius stepped forward. "It wasn't a single incident, Mr. Fletcher." At his signal, the doors opened again, and several people entered: Captain Benjamin Morris in his uniform, Tanya Rodriguez, Dr. Gabrielle Johnson, and 3 former SkyWest employees. "These individuals have all agreed to testify about the pattern of discrimination they've witnessed or experienced," Darius explained. "Captain Morris has provided documentation spanning 23 years. Morris stepped forward. "As a senior captain, I've observed numerous incidents similar to what happened to young Elijah. I've reported them through proper channels repeatedly, only to see them buried or dismissed." One of the former employees, a black woman who had worked as a gate agent for 7 years, added, "We were trained to apply extra scrutiny to certain passengers, using coded language that everyone understood to mean racial profiling." As each person shared their experience, the board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to concern to grim recognition. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Victoria Zhao looked directly at Fletcher. "Did you know about these patterns, Marcus?" Fletcher's silence was damning. Jamal reclaimed the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, I recognize this is an extraordinary situation. But it demands an extraordinary response. The transformation plan before you isn't just about addressing yesterday's incident. It's about ensuring no other child experiences what my son did. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. As majority shareholder, I could simply impose these changes. But I believe in consensus when possible. So I'm asking for your support in implementing this plan, beginning with new leadership at SkyWest. Chairman Blackwell, who had been reading the transformation plan while others spoke, finally looked up. Dr. Thompson, while your approach is unorthodox, your ownership position is clear. And frankly, this plan addresses issues that have concerned several board members for some time. He turned to Fletcher. Marcus, I think it would be appropriate for you to step out while the board discusses this matter. Fletcher stood, fury and disbelief warring on his face. Lawrence, you can't seriously. I can and I am, Blackwell stated firmly. Please wait in my office. After Fletcher stormed out, the board engaged in a surprisingly productive discussion. Several members who had previously raised concerns about SkyWest's culture expressed relief that action was finally being taken. Others who had been unaware of the extent of the problems asked thoughtful questions about implementation. While the adults talked, William Thompson knelt beside his grandson. How are you feeling, Elijah? The boy watched his father commanding the attention of these powerful people. Proud, he said simply. Dad's fixing it, just like he promised. Dorothy smiled. Your father learned early that you don't just complain about broken things. You fix them. Even when they're as big as an airline? Elijah asked. Especially then, William confirmed. The bigger the system, the more important it is to get it right. After 40 minutes of discussion, Chairman Blackwell called for a vote. The result was unambiguous, 19 in favor, for abstentions, 0 against the transformation plan. Dr. Thompson, Blackwell announced, the board has approved your plan. Marcus Fletcher will be removed as CEO of SkyWest effective immediately. We request your recommendations for interim leadership while a proper search is conducted. Jamal nodded. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the board's willingness to take decisive action. As the meeting concluded, Jamal was approached by several board members expressing their support. Victoria Zhao was particularly direct. That was impressive, she said. Most people with your resources would have simply filed a lawsuit and moved on. Lawsuits don't change systems, Jamal replied. They just put price tags on injustice. Outside the boardroom, Marcus Fletcher waited, his career in shambles. When Jamal emerged, Fletcher approached him. You've destroyed everything I've built, he accused bitterly. No, Marcus, Jamal corrected him. You did that yourself, one ignored complaint at a time. As they left the building, news crews had gathered at the entrance, alerted by rumors of major changes at Transglobal Airways. Jamal paused at the door. Do you want to speak to them? He asked Elijah quietly. The boy considered this seriously. What would Mom say I should do? Jamal smiled, touched by the question. She'd say to use your voice when it matters. Elijah nodded firmly. Then I want to talk to them. Together, father and son stepped into the bright California sunshine and a future that had been irrevocably altered by a single slap and the determination to ensure it never happened again. 1 month later, the newly renovated SkyWest headquarters buzzed with activity as employees gathered in the main auditorium for a company-wide address. The past 30 days had seen more changes than the previous 5 years combined, creating an atmosphere of both uncertainty and cautious optimism. On stage, Jamal Thompson stood alongside the newly appointed interim CEO, Tanya Rodriguez, the same flight attendant who had stepped in after Sandra Whitfield was removed from Elijah's flight. Her elevation from cabin crew to executive leadership had sent shockwaves through the industry, but her 15 years of frontline experience and master's degree in organizational leadership made her uniquely qualified to guide the airline's cultural transformation. "Good morning, SkyWest," Tanya began, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "Today marks 1 month since we embarked on this journey together. I won't sugarcoat it, it's been challenging. Change always is. But I've been inspired by how many of you have embraced this opportunity to redefine who we are as a company." The audience's response was warm but measured. Many employees remained uncertain about their futures in this rapidly evolving environment. "Before I outline our progress and next steps," Tanya continued, "I'd like to introduce the man whose vision is guiding our transformation. Dr. Jamal Thompson." Jamal stepped forward to polite applause that grew stronger as he began speaking. Over the past month, he had spent considerable time with employees at all levels, listening more than talking, and earning respect through his genuine commitment to improving conditions for everyone. "Thank you, Tanya. And thank you all for your dedication during this transition," he began. "1 month ago, my son experienced something no child should ever face. But what could have ended with a lawsuit and a news cycle has instead become the catalyst for meaningful change." He briefly outlined the changes already implemented: Sandra Whitfield's termination and subsequent legal charges for assaulting a minor, mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, the establishment of an anonymous reporting system for discriminatory incidents, and the creation of a passenger Bill of Rights prominently displayed at all gates and in all aircraft. "But perhaps the most significant change," Jamal continued, "is one you can't see in policy documents. It's the shift from a culture of denial to one of accountability." He nodded toward the back of the auditorium, where Captain Benjamin Morris stood with several other employees who had come forward with their experiences of discrimination. They had formed the core of a new ethics advisory board, empowered to review complaints and recommend systemic solutions. "These brave individuals risked their careers to speak truth," Jamal acknowledged. "Under the old SkyWest, they might have been silenced or pushed out. Today, they're helping lead the way forward." The transformation hadn't been without resistance. A vocal minority of executives from the Fletcher era had resigned rather than adapt to the new requirements. Industry analysts had initially predicted disaster, arguing that the airline would become too focused on social issues at the expense of operational efficiency. But the early results were proving the skeptics wrong. Employee retention had already improved by 7%. Customer satisfaction scores were trending upward. And after an initial dip, SkyWest stock had stabilized and begun to recover as investors recognized that better corporate culture could translate to better bottom-line results. Tanya returned to the podium to outline the next phase of changes: a complete overhaul of hiring practices to eliminate bias, partnerships with aviation programs at historically black colleges and universities, and the introduction of transparent performance metrics tied directly to diversity and inclusion goals. "These aren't separate from our business objectives," she emphasized. "They're essential to them. An airline that truly serves all passengers must be built by a workforce that reflects all passengers." Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Elijah Thompson had returned to school, carrying both visible and invisible marks from his experience. The physical mark on his cheek had faded completely, but the memory remained fresh. With the help of Dr. Anita Crawford, a child psychologist specializing in trauma recovery, he was processing what had happened in healthy ways. "How did you feel when you saw the news about the airline changing?" Dr. Crawford asked during one of their sessions. Elijah considered the question carefully. Good. Like maybe it happened for a reason. What reason do you think that might be? Dad says sometimes bad things happen to show us what needs to be fixed, Elijah explained. And now lots of people won't have bad things happen to them because we fixed it. Dr. Crawford smiled at his resilience. That's a very mature way of looking at it. Does it still make you sad or scared when you think about what happened? Sometimes, Elijah admitted. But Dad says it's okay to feel that way. And Grandpa says I helped change history, even though I didn't mean to. Back in San Francisco, the transformation was extending beyond SkyWest's walls. Other airlines, sensing a shift in public expectations, had begun reviewing their own diversity practices and complaint procedures. The industry association had formed a special committee on inclusive customer service, with Jamal invited as a founding advisor. Dr. Gabrielle Johnson, the pediatrician who had helped Elijah on the flight, had accepted a position on SkyWest's new ethics board, bringing her perspective as both a medical professional and a frequent traveler who had experienced discrimination firsthand. The outpouring of similar stories has been overwhelming, she told a reporter from the San Francisco Chronicle. What happened to Elijah Thompson was extreme but not unique. The difference is that his father had the resources and determination to demand systemic change. The reporter had asked the question many were wondering. Some critics suggest Dr. Thompson is using his wealth to impose his personal agenda on a public company. How would you respond to that? Dr. Johnson had smiled. I'd say using wealth to create more equitable systems is precisely what wealth should be used for. And let's be clear, treating all customers with dignity isn't a personal agenda. It's basic human decency that also happens to be good business. Not all responses had been positive. Sandra Whitfield had hired an aggressive attorney and was attempting to portray herself as the victim of cancel culture, though her legal position was weak given the overwhelming video evidence and witness testimonies. Right-wing media outlets had criticized the takeover, framing it as excessive punishment for one employee's mistake. Jamal had anticipated this backlash and chosen not to engage directly with critics. Instead, he let the results speak for themselves: SkyWest's improved performance metrics, positive employee feedback, and the industry-wide conversation about necessary changes. As the company meeting concluded, Tanya introduced a surprise guest, Elijah Thompson, appearing via video link from his school in Atlanta. "Hi everyone," he said, waving shyly at the camera. "I just wanted to say thank you for making your airline better. My dad says you're all working really hard." The simplicity of his message, and the reminder of why these changes mattered, brought many in the audience to tears. This wasn't about corporate politics or power plays. It was about ensuring that no other child would experience what Elijah had. After the meeting, Jamal met privately with the Ethics Advisory Board to review progress and challenges. Captain Morris provided updates on the pilot training program, while Dr. Johnson shared feedback from customer focus groups. "We're making real progress," Morris acknowledged. "But there's still resistance from some of the old guard who think this is just a temporary PR exercise." "That's to be expected," Jamal replied. "Cultural change doesn't happen overnight. The key is consistency and accountability." Dr. Johnson nodded. "Speaking of accountability, have you seen the latest data on complaint resolution? Our response time has improved by 63%, and the quality of investigations is significantly better." The meeting continued with frank discussions about remaining challenges, from budget constraints to communication barriers. But beneath these practical concerns ran a deeper current of hope. the sense that they were creating something that would outlast any individual leader or initiative. They were building a template that other companies could follow, proving that equity and profitability weren't opposing forces but complementary ones. As the day ended, Jamal stepped out onto the SkyWest headquarters balcony, gazing at the planes taking off and landing at the nearby airport. Each aircraft represented hundreds of human interactions, moments where people of different backgrounds, beliefs, and appearances had to navigate shared spaces with mutual respect. His phone buzzed with a text from Elijah. "Did they like my video, Dad?" "They loved it," he replied. "You reminded everyone why this matters." 6 months after the slap that changed everything, SkyWest would become the industry leader in both diversity metrics and customer satisfaction. What had begun as a father's outrage had evolved into a movement that was quietly but fundamentally changing how Americans experienced air travel. But the true measure of success wouldn't be found in corporate reports or stock prices. It would be written on the face of every child who boarded a plane and felt truly welcome, regardless of the color of their skin. Did you witness the power of accountability in this story? If you believe more companies should face consequences for systemic discrimination, type "justice" in the comments. Has your view on how change happens in corporate America shifted after hearing this story? Hit that like button if you found this tale of transformation inspiring. Subscribe for more stories about everyday injustices being confronted with extraordinary courage. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder that one person truly can change an entire system when they refuse to accept the status quo. 6 months after the incident that sparked a corporate revolution, Elijah Thompson stood in the first-class cabin of SkyWest Flight 1507, the same flight number, the same route, but an entirely different experience. The newly redesigned cabin featured subtle nods to diverse cultural influences in its color palette and artwork. More significantly, the crew reflected a diversity that would have been unimaginable under the previous leadership. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Thompson," said flight attendant Derek Williams, a recent hire who had benefited from SkyWest's new recruitment initiatives targeting underrepresented communities. "It's an honor to have you with us today." Elijah, now 9 years old and noticeably more confident than the frightened child who had been slapped half a year earlier, smiled. "Thank you. I like the new uniforms." "Me too," Derek agreed, touching the distinctive pin on his lapel. A small globe embraced by wings of many colors, the symbol of SkyWest's transformation. Jamal Thompson settled into the seat beside his son, observing the interaction with quiet satisfaction. The past 6 months had been intense, demanding more of his time and energy than any previous business venture. But watching Elijah navigate this space with renewed trust made every difficult decision worthwhile. "Dad," Elijah whispered as other passengers boarded, "is Ms. Whitfield still in trouble?" Jamal considered how to answer this age-appropriate yet honest question. Sandra Whitfield's journey had taken unexpected turns. After her termination and the filing of assault charges, she had initially doubled down, giving defiant interviews portraying herself as the victim. But faced with overwhelming evidence and public condemnation, something had shifted. "She's completing her community service program," Jamal explained. "And she's enrolled in the education course we developed." What he didn't mention was his controversial decision to fund a rehabilitation program for employees terminated for discriminatory behavior. Critics had called it overly generous, but Jamal believed true transformation required offering paths to redemption alongside accountability. The Second Chance initiative provided former employees like Sandra with anti-bias education, counseling, and eventually, opportunities to speak to new hires about their experiences. Participation wasn't mandatory, but those who completed the program received assistance finding employment outside the airline industry. To everyone's surprise, including her own attorneys, Sandra had eventually dropped her countersuit and enrolled in the program. Her public apology 3 months after the incident had seemed genuinely remorseful, though only time would reveal whether her transformation was lasting. "Is she still angry at me?" Elijah asked. "No, buddy," Jamal assured him. "She's learning that her anger wasn't really about you at all." The flight to San Francisco proceeded smoothly, a stark contrast to their previous journey. Throughout the cabin, subtle changes reflected the airline's new direction: diverse food options accommodating various cultural and religious preferences, in-flight entertainment featuring content from global filmmakers, and most importantly, crew members trained not just to tolerate diversity but to celebrate it. Upon landing, they were greeted by a welcome committee including Tanya Rodriguez, now permanently installed as SkyWest's CEO after the interim period proved her exceptional leadership abilities. Dr. Thompson, Elijah, she greeted them warmly. "Welcome to a very special day. Today marked the official unveiling of SkyWest's complete rebrand and the public announcement of the Thompson Standards, a comprehensive set of equality benchmarks now being adopted industry-wide." The ceremony would take place in the airline's largest hangar, transformed for the occasion into an event space highlighting the company's journey. As they made their way through the terminal, Jamal noticed something remarkable: employees approached them not with the nervous deference typically shown to a majority shareholder, but with genuine warmth. Many shared personal stories about how the changes had improved their work environment or resolved long-standing issues they'd previously felt powerless to address. "Mr. Thompson," said a ground crew member, stopping them briefly, "I just wanted to thank you. My daughter just started pilot training through the new scholarship program. She never thought it was possible." These moments had become increasingly common, each one reinforcing Jamal's belief that systemic change, while difficult, created ripples that extended far beyond balance sheets and policy documents. The hangar ceremony brought together employees, industry representatives, civil rights leaders, and even competitors who had recognized the business advantages of SkyWest's new approach. The company's stock had not only recovered but reached new heights as consumers increasingly made travel choices based on corporate values. Tanya Rodriguez opened the ceremony with characteristic straightforwardness. 6 months ago, SkyWest made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Today, we're making history for the right ones. She outlined the quantifiable results of their transformation: employee retention up 23%, customer complaints down 41%. And a 17% increase in market share among minority travelers, a demographic other airlines had consistently undervalued. "But numbers only tell part of the story," she continued. "The real transformation is in the countless human interactions that happen across our airline every day, interactions now based on dignity, respect, and belonging." When it was Jamal's turn to speak, he surprised everyone by inviting Elijah to join him at the podium. He lifted his son so he could reach the microphone. "6 months ago, something bad happened to me on a plane," Elijah said, his voice small but clear in the massive space. "It made me scared and sad. But my dad always says when something breaks, you don't just throw it away. You fix it." The simplicity of his statement captured the essence of everything they'd worked to achieve. As the ceremony continued, Dr. Gabrielle Johnson, now heading SkyWest's ethics board, presented the official Thompson Standards document, a framework other transportation companies were already adopting. Captain Benjamin Morris, recently promoted to Director of Training, introduced a revolutionary simulator program that included scenarios specifically designed to help crew members recognize and address bias in real-time situations. The most powerful moment, however, came during the recognition of SkyWest's transformation champions, employees who had taken extraordinary steps to implement changes in their departments. To everyone's surprise, one of the honorees was Tanya Rodriguez's 13-year-old daughter, Sophia, who had developed a children's book explaining diversity in aviation that would now be available on all SkyWest flights. "My mom always told me that big changes start with small actions," Sophia explained shyly. "After hearing what happened to Elijah, I wanted to help make sure other kids know they belong on planes too, no matter what they look like." Elijah beamed at this, clearly seeing himself in the young girl's mission. Following the ceremony, a more intimate gathering took place in a conference room overlooking the runway. Jamal had arranged for Elijah to meet with children from diverse backgrounds who dreamed of careers in aviation. The Thompson Foundation, established with a portion of Jamal's SkyWest holdings, now provided scholarships, mentorship, and resources to make those dreams accessible. As Elijah excitedly showed the other children his prized aviation encyclopedia, Jamal stepped away to take a call from Andre Williams, his financial advisor. "The final numbers are in," Andre reported. "The Thompson Method case study is being added to the Harvard Business School curriculum next semester. They're calling it the most successful example of values-driven corporate transformation in the past decade." "That's gratifying," Jamal acknowledged, "but what matters more is the industry-wide impact." "On that front, the news is even better," Andre continued. 3 more airlines have announced adoption of the standards, and the FAA is considering incorporating elements into their regulatory framework. After the call, Jamal rejoined the children's gathering, where Dr. Johnson was now leading an activity about different perspectives. He watched as Elijah confidently participated, showing no traces of the trauma that had once threatened to make him fear public spaces. Later that evening, Jamal and Elijah sat in their hotel room, reflecting on the day's events. "Dad," Elijah said thoughtfully, "remember when you told me that bad things sometimes happen to show us what needs to be fixed?" "I remember," Jamal nodded. "I think I understand that better now," Elijah continued. "If Ms. Whitfield hadn't slapped me, none of these good changes would have happened." Jamal considered this. The changes were needed regardless. What happened to you just made them impossible to ignore any longer. Like how Grandpa says sometimes you need thunder to make people look at the sky. Jamal smiled at his son's recollection of William Thompson's metaphors. Exactly like that. As Elijah prepared for bed, Jamal received a text message from Tanya with a link to the latest industry newsletter. The headline read, "Transglobal Airways announces Thompson standards will be implemented across all subsidiary airlines worldwide." The transformation that had begun with a single slap in a first-class cabin was now poised to affect air travel for millions of passengers across the globe. Systems that had seemed immovable were being reimagined. Practices that had been accepted as inevitable were being challenged and changed. The next morning, as a birthday surprise for Elijah, Jamal had arranged a special flight. A small charter plane staffed entirely by pilots and crew of color, taking a group of children from underrepresented backgrounds on their first flying experience. As they boarded, Elijah's face glowed with excitement not just for himself but for the other children. Captain Amara Okafor, one of the few black female commercial airline captains in the country and now SkyWest's head of diversity recruitment, knelt to greet each child personally. When she reached Elijah, she said something that brought tears to Jamal's eyes. "Because of you, these children will never have to be twice as good to be treated half as well. They'll just get to be children, enjoying the wonder of flight." As they settled into their seats, Elijah turned to his father with unexpected seriousness. "Dad, I think I know what I want to be when I grow up." "What's that, buddy?" "A pilot," Elijah declared. "So I can make sure everyone feels welcome in the sky." Jamal smiled, his heart full. Then that's exactly what you'll become. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Jamal thought about Maria, how proud she would be of their son's resilience and compassion. How she would have approved of using their resources not just for comfort but for transformation. How she had always believed that the measure of a life was not what you accumulated but what you changed. The slap that was meant to put Elijah in his place had instead redefined what that place could be, not just for him but for countless others who would never know his name but would benefit from the ripples of change he had inspired. As the plane lifted into the clear blue sky, carrying a cabin full of children who now saw a possibility where barriers had once stood, Jamal realized that this wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about building something better than had ever existed before. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful form of justice, not destruction, but transformation. Not punishment, but progress. Not retribution, but renewal. This story teaches us that true change requires more than outrage, it demands strategic action and systemic thinking. When facing discrimination, the most powerful response isn't just addressing the individual incident but transforming the environment that allowed it to happen. Dr. Jamal Thompson could have simply sued the airline or accepted compensation, but he recognized that these approaches would only treat symptoms while leaving the disease intact. The story also highlights how privilege and power can be used as forces for good. Jamal leveraged his resources not for revenge but for reformation, creating lasting impact that extended far beyond his personal situation. He showed that accountability doesn't have to be destructive, it can be the foundation for rebuilding something better. Perhaps most importantly, the story reminds us that children are watching how we respond to injustice. By turning his son's traumatic experience into a catalyst for positive change, Jamal taught Elijah a profound lesson about resilience, responsibility, and constructive problem-solving. He demonstrated that even painful experiences can serve a greater purpose when we channel our pain into progress. In a world where discrimination often seems too entrenched to challenge, this story offers hope that strategic action, moral clarity, and unwavering persistence can transform even the most resistant systems. The most meaningful justice isn't found in punishment but in creating a world where such injustices are less likely to occur again. What moments of discrimination have you witnessed or experienced, and how did you respond? Could you have taken more strategic action? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you believe in the power of accountability to create positive change, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and transformation. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to stand up against discrimination in their own life. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is not just speaking out, but systematically rebuilding what's broken.